I would like to call the the Policy Committee meeting of the Nashua Board of Education to order at 6:04 p.m. We're in the Nashua High School North Boardroom. Mr. Mosher?
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Mosher is joining us from home. Are you by yourself, Mr. Mosher?
Yes, sure am.
Thank you. Ms. Van Twyver?
Present.
Ms. Timmons is also joining us by telephone. Are you by yourself, Ms. Timmons?
No, I'm not by myself, but I do have earplugs on,
Oh.
so you may hear kids coming in and out.
Okay,
Well, not kids, but my grown grandkids.
okay. Thank you. Also with us tonight is, we have Ms. Oden and also Ms. Porter and Ms. Fitzpatrick. And Mr. Greeno is also present. Okay, so our first item on the agenda is policy EBCB, which is fire safety. In the packets, we have a memo from Mr. Lassard, who has vetted this policy and has updated the policy. I've gone through it myself, and he's got a couple of changes. His changes are on page 2. Ms. Fitzpatrick, do you want to say anything about this?
He also attached a, just an informational page on power strips and being safe with power strips, so that's part of the reason, sorry, that he made the changes, but the changes are all things that happened based on a conversation with the fire marshal.
Thank you. Does anyone on the committee have any comments or questions on policy EBCB and the proposed changes?
No.
Mr. Mosher? Go ahead,
No
Mr. Mosher.
comments. One thing that I did learn was in working with the fire marshal, the state fire marshal, years ago when I was in the House, that we had a policy that or a law that we were putting up about urethane and the danger of urethane bedroom or kitchen materials, put it that way, that when these are on fire or they catch fire, they emit smoke, and the smoke is deadly to the human life. And many fires that could be safely extinguished because they emit these smokes. Let's see, that was at Bill Bliss at the time was the, I think it was his name, was the fire marshal. And we put the thing up, and we were going to use the California code to limit the urethane material unless it was fire resistant. So, I mean, that's the only other thing that I can think of. But otherwise, I see what he's got here, the memo on the fire. It's all good and solid advice. So I'm all for it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mosher. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Ms. Porter?
I know that this is not in the budget, I'm sure, but the reason that people are using extension cords is because there are not enough outlets in classrooms. So you have a lot of technology coming into classrooms that needs to be plugged in. You have just, more things that need to be plugged in. So I understand, completely defer to the fire marshal on this. But on the other hand, what are people supposed to do if they don't have enough outlets in their classrooms? And is there, I know the deferred maintenance plan budget is very low. I know there's no money anywhere, but is this something that can be put somewhere that we could kind of do an audit of classrooms. I know the classroom that I was in was a very large classroom. I can't remember. I think I had 2 outlets. So while this is safe and necessary, what are teachers to do?
I'd like to try to help answer that a little bit.
Thank you.
These changes are, and these changes were recommended by the Nashua Fire Marshal. These changes have to do with surge protectors and what appliances could be put on the surge protectors, like those that are some large, they're large equipments like microwaves, refrigerators, toasters, coffee makers. So you can still use the outlets for some of the things in the classroom, but it's just that surge protectors are limited for certain appliances. So there might be a lot of other needs that you have in the classroom, maybe electronics or things like that, which are perfectly fine, but because they're not under here. But there is, like you say, there is limitations. So when we build our new middle school and when we rehab the other middle schools, I think that we definitely need to make sure that we have enough receptacles, enough outlets in the classrooms. I think that you make a good point there.
I think that with new building, that would, I assume, would be code, a certain number of outlets, but some of the buildings are very old. And I'm looking at the attachment that came, that was referenced, and on the back it says, it's got a list of computer, LCD monitor, speakers, desk lamp, scanner, printer, all of these things, and there's a formula where people are supposed to look and see what their usage is and what the load is on a certain power strip, because we use power strips as an extension cord, basically. So, I mean, I wouldn't expect every teacher to have to go and follow this up, and, you know, because I was thinking just in my own home, what do I have? Because it mentions in here that they're using power even if it's not turned on and being used. Just the fact of it being plugged into the strip is using power. So my only thing is, like, I'm just thinking of teachers in their classrooms who, you know, don't have enough outlets. They obviously don't want to put their students and themselves in danger. But I think that as a companion to this policy, it would be prudent to kind of look at classrooms and see which classrooms are in need of more outlets and what we're requiring, you know, laptop carts for testing, and, you know, all of these things need to be plugged in. So I'm just saying, as a corollary to this, I would request, I guess, that we look into classroom situations as far as outlets.
Can I just add one thing? The fire marshal does make an inspection every year, and if there's specific areas that they're very concerned about, they do let the principals know, so the principals can let the teachers know. So when it comes to laptops or Chromebook carts or something like that, the fire marshal has seen those kinds of uses, and that's okay. They're more concerned about microwaves, coffee pots, those kinds of appliances being used. And I think it's not just because of the surge protectors, but I think it's because of the additional hazard that can happen with those specific appliances.
Right. And also it mentions in here that the cord shouldn't run under a rug because then it can't be heated, but it's also a trip hazard. So that's all. I'm just asking if we can.
I think that's reasonable to do an audit to see.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, may I say something?
Sure, go ahead, Ms. Timmons.
Okay, this may be out of the box, but it works. I have a lot of grandkids, and they all have cell phones. So when they come here, they use a stackable charger, and sometimes I have 8 chargers on one stack. So that's 8 kids can use a charger anytime because I don't have outlets where they can plug up that used to fight over the outlets, and now they don't because of the stackable chargers. That may be something you might want to consider. They really work, and they're very inexpensive.
Can I comment there?
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Mosher.
I have a number of chargers over here also for different portable electronics. None of them use a great amount of electricity. And to address the one thing that you mentioned, the fact that some things draw power, these are called phantom loads, and they're usually very, very low powered. And the other thing is the chargers themselves, they are also very, very low powered, because what they're doing is they're taking the AC current, changing it to DC current, like battery current, to power your telephones and things like that. So there's absolutely, I would say, the odds of anything happening with those charges is little to none. So the amount of power that's being used is very, very small. It's actually minuscule.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Just on the second page, I have a question. I guess it has to do with grammar. The addition in red, there should be a comma before or. Is like a period there or a dash. It should just be like a comma. And it says California Technical Bulletin Flammable Standard Requirements. Is that what you were talking about with the styrofoam, Mr. Mosher?
No, I was talking about urethane, not the styrofoam.
Oh, I'm sorry, urethane is different. Okay, I apologize. But if, I wonder if that covers what you were talking about with the urethane.
Well, styrofoam is entirely different. When it gets hot, it melts.
Right. But,
And it
yep.
does, to my knowledge, it does not give off the gas that is poisonous.
Right, I confused the two materials. But it says, it talks about California Technical Bulletin 1172013 flammable standard requirements. Does that cover what you were talking about with the urethane? Do you know if that, because you were talking about California requirements. So,
It may. I'm not aware that, if it has been changed at all, but that may cover that.
okay. Go ahead, Ms. Fitzpatrick.
Do you want a comma to replace, there's
Yeah.
a dash and a period, you want a comma to replace that, correct?
Yeah, just for grammatical purposes.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments regarding EBCB? I could entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. On the motion to accept policy EBCB, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. And what I would suggest, Ms. Porter, that when we bring this to the full board, that you make a motion at the time to have, well, I guess Ms. Fitzpatrick said that we do have audits of our classrooms, right? The fire marshal goes through, and they make recommendations regarding what their needs are and safety.
Yes, but I also, excuse me, I also made a note to see about an outlet, excuse me. I apologize. An outlet audit, and I'm going to speak to Sean and Chris and see
Okay.
if that's something that's viable that we can do and move forward with that information.
Okay, so then we won't have to need a motion at that, so if you cover that.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, we're going to move to proposed AD, Philosophy of the School District. And this is a substantial change to the existing policy. It shortens it very much, and it makes it consistent with the vision, the mission, and the values that were recently adopted in our strategic plan.
And it hasn't been revised since 1987.
So,
Just
yeah.
saying.
Right. And, you know, when we shorten things, sometimes we make them better when we just shorten them. But I'm going to ask the committee members if they have any questions or comments regarding the changes to policy AD.
No.
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, Mr. Mosher.
Yeah, and the heading on this, where it says our vision, and it goes through with several sentences. You got 1, 2, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 3 sentences, and then you have a short paragraph. That I believe that paragraph should not be crossed out, but it should be incorporated into the philosophy because it's very appropriate. And the only thing that I would do is I would change the last line where it says that they should be productive, responsible, and self-fulfilling members of society, which is what we want to do, what we should be looking at in our philosophy of the school district, to make them fulfilled members of society. And so I think that this that last paragraph there should be incorporated into the philosophy of the Board of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? I have no objections to adding this this last paragraph back in with the change, just saying that self-fulfilled members of society. Nashua schools receive students with a variety of abilities. Goal of the program. Yeah, I have no problem with it. I don't know how the other members feel. We could add it back in.
Add it back in, I don't care.
Okay, so I could entertain a motion to accept AD with the addition of that paragraph that begins Nashua schools receive students back into it, and with just a change to the last sentence.
Okay, I move that we approve this
Okay,
as amended.
okay, move to approve policy AD
Right, and just make it of society.
with paragraph added back in. Ms. Fitzpatrick, do you see any problem with that paragraph being added back in?
No, I just, I've been going through the policy manual and looking for the numbers and looking for the oldest policies to update.
Right.
Because the school district has a policy that says we're going to update policies every 4 years, so I figured 1987.
Yeah.
And we did just finish the strategic plan, so our philosophy should align with the strategic plan, so I thought this was but I don't think that that last paragraph is in opposition to the strategic plan.
Right. I think it adds to it. So on the motion, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Motion carries 3-0. Okay. All right, so we have policy 1210, which is the older policy, National School Philosophy on Objectives to be rescinded. Does anybody have any comments or questions regarding that?
No, I move to rescind the policy.
Okay,
I'll second it.
okay. On the motion to rescind policy 1210, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Motion carries 3-0. All right, we're moving right along. Yep. We have volunteer assurance form. That is IJOC-R. Ms. Fitzpatrick, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, the only difference in this form is that it had a spot for the child's name, and that's a violation if somebody's acting as a volunteer besides, not all the volunteers are parents. So we took out the line that asked the child's name, but everything else on the form is the same. Because asking a child's name is A, not appropriate for everyone because not everyone has a child that volunteers, and B, why would you need the child's name for somebody to become a volunteer?
Well, we do have students who volunteer during the summertime.
Right, and they're not,
Correct them.
they would be the volunteer, they wouldn't be the child.
Where
They-
was it before?
Under volunteer name, under there, it asked for the child's name. So it asked, volunteers to say who their children were, and they might not have children, they might not be in the Nashua School District, but regardless, it's not an appropriate thing to be asking on a form for a volunteer to fill out.
But does the parent have to approve or submit the form for the child if they're going to volunteer in the summertime?
If a student's under 18, that would be through a different process, and there's different ways that's handled through extended learning opportunities and those sorts of things. So if
There's different
students,
protocols.
if students volunteer, for example, we had students that volunteered with the summer program, that was through an extended learning opportunity, so that was actually through, quote, course selection, so they were volunteering, but they were earning credit.
And that's the only way that a student or
Yes.
a minor can
A minor,
volunteer?
yes.
Mr. Motion, did you have something to add?
No, I read this through thoroughly, and I agree with the fact that you're taking out the student's name.
Okay. Does anyone else have any? Go ahead, Ms. Oden.
Thank you. I have a question. Would a parent volunteer on a field trip have to fill this out?
My understanding is any volunteer for any school activity has to fill out a form.
Okay. I guess for me, from my experience, I would recommend that principals make sure their staff knows that, because there have been times when people have shown up and hadn't gone through it, that this is in place and needs to be followed. So maybe in their newsletters, they send home monthly newsletters, they can let parents know that should they volunteer for a field trip, that they must fill out one of these
Forms.
forms. Yeah, thank you.
And actually, this was quite a discussion last year because volunteers also have to be fingerprinted. And so in central office, there was an extensive discussion about if a parent's going to volunteer to chaperone on a field trip, do they have to be fingerprinted? And after lots of debate and follow-up with council, it was decided yes.
Oh,
Go ahead, Ms. Porter.
I agree with that, because if you're chaperoning on a field trip, you could send a group of kids, say you're at the Museum of Science, and you're sending a parent off with a group of kids that you can't see. So I think that's totally appropriate to fingerprint them.
Ms. Van Twyver.
My only suggestion is that we add an board-approved date on this,
Oh, okay.
both forms.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Timmons.
This is for Ms. Fitzpatrick. Does this include background checks as well?
Yes, it does with the fingerprinting.
Thanks.
It says, I think it says that on the form, that it's going to be screening. Yeah.
but does it say they have to be fingerprinted? And
This
do
is-
they have to pay for that?
Yes, and this is R, and I think that the IJOC actually speaks to your question, because this is just the form that they fill out.
Right, okay. Does anyone else have any questions or comments regarding IJOC-R? Go ahead, Ms. Porter.
So the cost is for the volunteer to pay for the fingerprints. So what do we, it seems like we could have some low-income people who may be shut out of volunteering because they can't afford to pay for this. Is there any way that we could help people out? Because that's a pretty big swath of people who are not eligible.
That was a big part of the discussion last year around this, and ideas about sliding scale, et cetera, came up, but it's a fee that's set by it's not set by the district.
So if somebody was on free or reduced lunch, perhaps, would that maybe qualify them to have some sort of a waiver where, I don't know where the funds would come from, but
The district.
And I understand it's a very, I understand that, but I think that this could be very discriminatory.
I agree.
So I have some reservations about going forward without a remedy to that.
I know, and we, like I said, it was a big discussion last year, and we ended up going on the advice of council, and I agree with you. I think it probably eliminates the ability of some folks to volunteer.
A large number. I mean, if we look at our free and reduced population at some of our schools, this is how we qualify for Title I. We're taking a lot of people out of contention. I'm very uncomfortable with that.
And I can take it back to central office and bring the topic up again about a sliding scale or a waiver or some way that we would be able to allow people to volunteer without paying the full fee.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Ventwiver, I'm sorry.
Which council? And what
Tom.
was it? Tom, and what was his reason?
The reason was that because they're going to be in contact with children, we had to follow the same guidelines as we do with any adult that's going to be in contact with kids, because it's our liability.
I would suggest that we follow his counsel.
Oh, I 100% agree with following. I think that nobody should be volunteering without having had this done. I'm just very concerned about the large percentage of people we're eliminating from eligibility. We're looking for outreach to families, and we want family involvement. So, and here we are really cutting so many people out of that opportunity.
Do we know how many people have been shut out this year? Because
I don't have an actual number.
Well, I
It's
think.
early, too.
Right, but I think that the number might be irrelevant because it's just the opportunity. Whether people take advantage of this opportunity or not, that's up to them. But I wouldn't want somebody to feel that they can't do it because they can't afford that.
what does it cost to be fingerprinted?
$47.
Where does it specifically talk about fingerprinting?
I believe it talks about it in the policy, not, this is the
Not-
form.
This
yeah,
is the form,
yeah.
so,
And I didn't attach the policy.
right, so that change that Ms. Porter's looking for is in the policy, not actually in what we have before the
Correct.
before the
Doesn't
committee today.
necessarily, well, I don't know if it belongs in policy or not, but just some sort of a safety net for people to be able
Right.
to participate.
But that
$47 is a lot of money.
Right, but that change would come in the policy, this is the form,
Right.
that's right, so,
And I'm happy to at least bring the discussion back again and raise the concern and, have that conversation again. It doesn't hurt to talk.
Right, and I don't see like legions of people coming in, so we're gonna have a line item for like $4,000 or something. Would you think? I don't know. Well, even just a field trip. I wanna go on a field trip with my kid, and I can't because I can't afford $47.
I know it seems prohibitive, I agree.
Especially when one of the goals of the district is to include people and to have family outreach.
Okay.
So I don't know what the answer is, so.
Ms. Oden?
I might be able to help with that.
Okay, Ms. Oden and then Mr. Mosher.
I agree with the cost of it. You can be eliminating people, and quite frankly, I think it's disingenuous to invite somebody to be a volunteer and tell them they have to pay $47, no matter what your income level is. That staggers me that it's that expensive. But I would like to see, when it refers in the third paragraph, student safety, second sentence, we ask that you read New Hampshire RSA 632-A, :10, I would like parentheses saying, reprinted below. I would like them to know right there, when we mentioned the RSA, that we put in parentheses right there that it's reprinted below.
Reprinted below or see below?
As shown below.
As shown
Yeah.
below, whatever's clear. But I just would like it up there next to the RSA 632 designation.
Mr. Mosher, you were next?
Yes, I have a bright idea.
Okay.
And my bright idea is that we pass this IJOC-R with a contingent on fingerprint requirements.
Okay. Policy IJ, so that would mean to revisiting policy IJOC regarding fingerprint,
Requirements.
yep.
That way we can have the policy on the book, but it won't become until the fingerprint requirement is clarified.
Okay, and change to, does anybody have, does anyone on the committee have a problem with adding in as shown below after, in the second, in the third paragraph, second line? That's you, is that you, Mr. Kaufman, or no? Mr. Kaufman, yeah, Mr.
I think it was Miss Timmons'
Miss Timmons,
grandchild's
okay.
phone.
Oh, okay, one of the phones, okay.
You know, I just noticed that Mr. Mosley's name is on here. You're gonna have to change that every time we change superintendents.
Where's,
After it talks about, thank you for your.
oh yeah, Dr. Jamal Mosley, oh yeah. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Porter.
I think that we don't want to reconsider having fingerprints done, because I think we have to have that
Right.
done. It's the fee
It's the
associated.
cost.
It's the fee
Right,
associated.
that's what I wrote down.
Yeah,
So-
because it's
so what
not
I-
the idea
right.
of having the fingerprints.
right.
Right, okay.
So what I wrote as a motion is to approve IJOC-R with board approval date and a contingent on visiting policy IJOC regarding fingerprint cost requirement.
Okay.
And a change to the third paragraph, second line, adding as shown below for for RSA 632-A10.
Beautiful.
Go ahead, Ms. Oden.
After thinking about what Ms. Van Twyver said, would it be appropriate to have this say Nashua Board of Education?
Instead of, or we could just say superintendent of schools. We don't have to put
A name?
name there.
Yeah, superintendent of schools is fine.
Okay.
Okay. I have one question. Is it the police department that does the fingerprinting?
No,
No.
No?
It happens in HR and then they're sent out. It's federally done.
Okay, and that's where we have to pay for the federal?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was just wondering if we could have, like, each school have a day when parents could come in to be fingerprinted, if that would reduce the cost. But if it has to go to a federal agency, I'm guessing the cost is still there?
I would believe so. I don't know if, I don't think the federal government gives deals on, you know,
with this
12 for 47, 13th free. I don't think,
No volume discounts.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments regarding IJOC-R? So the motion, do I have a motion to approve IJOC-R with
So moved.
contingency? Okay. Mr. Mosher? I'll second it. Okay, so the motion is to approve IJOC-R with contingencies, and those contingencies are that we add board approval date, but we revisit policy IJOC regarding the fingerprint cost requirement, and we change the third paragraph, second line, adding as shown below for RSA 6032-A10, and also not include the superintendent's name on the sheet. So on the motion, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes.
Mr. Greeno votes yes. Motion carries 3-0. Okay. So our last item on our agenda tonight is the discussion, discipline in vaping. We have a report from Ms. Fitzpatrick that was included, and that's on secondary discipline data, and specifically vaping. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Ms. Oden?
Yes, I was looking at the first page, number 1, at the top, and it has Nashua High School North. There were 90 incidents involving 78 students. So I'm assuming some of those students, of the 78 students, were repeat offenders?
Correct.
I'd just like to know what the consequence was for a repeat offender as opposed to a first-time offender.
Excuse me. And I did note this in the report. The way that the current policy reads is vaping and tobacco is it's a lower level offense than it's being treated by administration. So the first time there's a suspension, and then the next time it would be a greater suspension. At the same time, they also are talking to informed adults about the dangers of vaping, and they offer them support in not vaping, sort of like as we've done before with cigarettes. Vaping's new. There's a lot of information that's not out there, and the marketing has been fabulous for teenagers. And so we're, working on combating that, just like at one point in time we were combating the advertising around cigarettes. Like Joe Camel is an example. He was a cool camel. So there's many things, and the principals are treating this as a higher infraction than what we have in the policy, because we know it's an important thing.
Well, JIC, that needs to be changed then.
And I put that suggestion in here, in the document that I,
Well, they can't invoke it until it's in the policy.
so we're going to have classroom teachers deal with Juuls, because that's what the policy currently says.
Well, you can't have the ticket issued by the SRO if it's
No,
not in the...
that's marijuana. This is vaping. And if they're vaping marijuana, then it's illegal, so that's different. It's a
It
different
doesn't
thing.
say, this says vaping is number 1. It says consequences, out-of-school suspension. At the 2 high schools, multiple incidents with the same student may result in a ticket issued by the SRO. If it's not in the JIC, then you've got to change JIC before you can invoke that.
I agree, but when there's the multiple incidences and the ticket is for vaping with THC and other marijuana-type drugs in the vape pipe, not nicotine. Because you can smoke a lot of stuff in vape pipes, not just,
And JIC needs to also include vaping with nicotine then. Do you see what
Okay.
I'm saying?
yes,
It needs to be changed.
I agree.
You can invoke it.
Ms. Oden?
The new law, how does that affect that? Because the new law aims to clear up confusion in the state's tobacco laws, which previously banned vaping devices that contain nicotine. It goes on. It clarifies that no matter what the liquid is inside the e-cigarette device, the device and the liquid are prohibited. So no matter if it's nicotine or marijuana or just a flavored juice, it's against the law. So I guess what we really need to do is to look at JIC, and I would like to see the word vaping in there. I know it's an e-cigarette, but I think the word vaping is well-known and more prevalent at this time. And I think we need to move vaping from a level 3 up to a level 2 anyway. That's some of my feeling. I guess it's, if a student, it's such a serious problem, I think that students ought to be educated about the dangers as we're learning more and more. Yeah, you see more lung problems developing across the country with this, anger management, anxiety, depression. Boston has been doing a lot. I think Boston General, well, one of the big hospitals in Boston. And I would like to see an education course with this. I think the coalition is trying to get something going, the Prevention Coalition.
I'm part of the coalition, and
Okay.
the coalition does come in and make presentations at school. If you look at the things that were, the measures and remedies that we're trying to do to educate students and parents around vaping, it has been incorporated into the health curriculum. It is addressed at the athletic preseason meetings with both athletes and parents. They're educated about the health dangers of vaping and consequences for student athletes caught vaping. At both high schools, students are required to meet with the student assistance program counselor several sessions to discuss it. We do have measures in place. We're not just disciplining students and saying, get over it. We're also taking measures to educate them. And the coalition does come in and make presentations at school. And I've also been investigating a speaker who has spoken around the country, who has a way of talking to kids that they're more likely to listen. And so we're investigating having him come in to speak. It depends on the cost, it depends on his availability, but we're continuing to come up with different ways to educate kids around the dangers of vaping. But I do want to point out, I agree 78 students is too many, but the reason that I put the percentages there is because I don't want people to think that, 700 of our 800 students in one of the high schools is vaping. They're not.
But it's a lot more than 4.4%.
Not based on our data.
These are only the students that were caught. It's very hard to catch students vaping, and the national number is over 20%, and I can't imagine that Nashua would be very different. So I'm guessing we have a high number, probably 300 kids that are not being caught because it's often done in the bathroom, and they can't go into the bathroom to catch them. So
Why can't they go into the bathroom to catch them?
because of privacy issues.
What? I don't believe that. Find that hard to
that's-
believe, Mrs. Oden.
That's what I was told.
Well, last night on the news, this kid was rehab, and he was talking about it, and they mentioned that the bathroom wasn't called a bathroom anymore, it was called a vaping room. The SROs certainly could go in there.
And the reality is it's often students reporting other students.
It is?
So I don't want to leave people with the impression that only 4.4 of our students vape. Those are only the numbers that were caught vaping.
Well, until.
So I think it's a bigger problem than 4.4% of our students, much bigger.
Well, until somebody can prove that, I'm going to accept these figures, so.
Well, I'm not questioning the figures. I think the figures are probably right. Those are the students that they caught vaping. But if you look at the numbers across the country, it's over 20% of high school students that are vaping. And I have been told by an administrator that it's very hard to catch the kids vaping. And it has to do with the fact that much of it goes on in the bathroom. And that some students don't want to go into the bathrooms because of all the vaping. So, you know.
The SRO ought to be making a bathroom trip.
I'd like to make a comment.
Go ahead, Mr. Mosher.
Yeah, I'm understanding about the problems that have been occurring across the country. I'm also aware that we have a half a dozen or a dozen people that have died already from the lung problems with the vaping because they are putting contraband into the vaping pipes and then using it sometimes with other drugs than marijuana or nicotine. Nicotine by itself is a deadly poison when taken in any kind of quantity. However, I don't like to see all of the Nashua students being lumped together into all the rest of the groups that are vaping and getting sick on account of it. I think that we are showing some very good figures there with this, and I don't think that we are doing the right thing by equating Nashua with Detroit or Philadelphia or someplace like that, because the difference in the people, the difference in the situations cannot apply 100% all over. However, what I would like to add into the question here is if we're going to ban the vaping, which I agree on, just like we have banned the cigarettes, but I think what we have to do is include the question and call it all e-cigarettes or smoking materials, e-smoking materials that into that ban and make it 100%, not just vaping, because they can get around that pretty easy. But we have to put it into all e-smoking products and put it that way so that it covers a broader area than just the vaping stuff like Juul and some others. So
Yep, go ahead.
we can't lump all of our students in with the rest of the country. That doesn't work.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. I think that Ms. Oden is probably correct that our vaping problem is somewhere between 4.4% and the national average 20%. That they're no, we're not. We're not the worst in the country, probably not. But I think that these are just the kids that got caught. And if you have ever seen these vaping things, this pen in my hand could be a vape and people couldn't even know it because they look like pens. They look like flashcards that you put in computers. So it's very easy for kids to slip these in to walk around, or not just kids, but any person to walk around with these, and you think they're regular objects, and they're not. They've even got them hooked up to their computers, and, you know, they get charged by hooking up to their computers, and then they could go smoke them afterwards, and you think it's a flash card, you know? So I think we're somewhere between 4% and the national average, some theirs. It's difficult to get good data, especially with something like this, when people don't want you to know what they're doing. It's hard.
Well, I disagree with that.
Can I make a comment?
Go ahead, Ms. Timmons.
Okay, I agree with Ms. Odoms as well. However, there's a flip side there. Listening to the kids, they're saying that there is some kids, yes, they're vaping, but sometimes the kids are in the bathroom and several kids will walk out and several kids will get picked up from vaping, and not all several kids was vaping. So there may be some kids that's not vaping but was accused of vaping. So we got to be very careful that 78 that did get caught may not all those 78 kids was actually vaping. So we don't really know that unless you physically catch them doing it. But a cloud of smoke coming out of bathrooms, because vaping create this big cloud, you don't know who's doing it. Mm-hmm. So we need to be conscious of that. That's all I have to say.
I think that we need to bring JIC back to this committee and make it a priority. I don't, if the committee members agree or disagree, please.
Well, I think it has to be done.
Okay.
We need to verify that our policy is up to the law. Mm-hmm. And I disagree that you can't get good data. If people are saying that there's a lot of smoke coming out of the bathroom, where's the SRO? The SRO need to be doing some checks. You know, it used to be in this country you were innocent until proven guilty or until you get caught. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's the wrong philosophy there, but I don't know how much vaping is going on in this, just as I don't know how much more than these obscene language and gestures are going on. This is the report that we got from the administration. This is what they believe is correct. And there's a lot of people, I remember working on the Ed Council, that there was a lot of talk, but nobody ever came up with full proof data to prove these things true. If you're not going to invoke, if you're not going to invoke the policy, then you cannot say it happens. That's just it. That's the way I feel about it. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Porter, you had your hand up?
Thank you. All right, so regardless of what the actual percent is and who's getting caught and who's not, I think the bottom line is the health curriculum to reach as many students as possible. So, because we can't know how many are not getting caught, obviously. So when it says on here that vaping and impacts on personal health is now part of the health curriculum at middle and high school, so is that how many? I'm not a middle school or a secondary school person. So is that health? Are kids taking that every semester?
No, but it is a requirement that they have it both at middle school level and high school level, so they have it at both levels. I don't think we have enough health in curriculum, and that's just my personal bias.
I totally agree, and that's why it's in the strategic plan to improve the health curriculum that we have. And I noticed down here that you're saying that each middle school does have some form of counseling, but not a formal student assistance program. Correct. I would suggest that we need this at elementary school because 4th and 5th graders are doing this too.
I heard today.
Right. So when these things happen, and the thing is, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but if they learn it early on and it becomes part of what they just know. So I think that part of the proactive measures here is to start early. I know you know that. So I'm just advocating for whatever the numbers happen to be, who's getting caught, who's not getting caught. I think that we need to really beef up the education on this, since it seems to be a very timely thing that's happening more and more.
And as a little aside, the coalition yesterday, part of our meeting was talking about how to get information out to parents about vaping, because there's probably misinformation out there as well with parents. And somebody on the committee who's younger than me, talked about how her generation was the one that pushed their parents to stop smoking cigarettes because they were the ones that were educated around cigarettes, so they got their parents to quit. And we're in a situation now where kids know more about vaping and electronic cigarettes than their parents do. So part of our conversation for the coalition is how do we get this knowledge out to parents as well? And so there's more than one agency, for lack of a better word, that's working on this in the city of
So
Nashua.
somebody we can partner with?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nashua Coalition is a school thing, or is it citywide?
No, it's under the umbrella of the United Way, and it's the Prevention Coalition. And they run on a federal grant, and they're the sponsors of Red Ribbon Week, which is a whole week in October of prevention, and it's about healthy lifestyle. The video competition we have for the PSAs is part of that, and we did it 2 years in a row, and it's incredibly popular with the kids. The winners get their PSAs played at Chunky's throughout the month of August. And actually, I went there recently, and a PSA was still playing. So, and it was in August. So all I'm saying is education and attacking this issue is happening on many fronts.
Go ahead, Ms. Oden.
Actually, Mrs. Petris, I think that's a good idea to have that played at Chunky's. I'm laying down because my knees are killing me about right now. But, yes, there's Chunky's have a video prior to every movie. I go to Chunky's a lot with my younger ones, and they have videos from BG and other areas. I think that would put the information out if we can get a presentation posted at Chunky's about vaping. Just a suggestion.
Okay, and also, when we have Red Ribbon Week, we ask businesses to get involved, and this year, in the past, we've done flyers, and this year we want something more prominent, so we have large red ribbons, which high school students in the SAD clubs are putting them together and pinning them, and we're asking businesses to hang those on their doors because they're more prominent. But also, we are developing a challenge for parents and doing a competition for prizes for them to put one on their door and take a selfie with them and their children and submit it to the coalition. And they're going to have raffle prizes for people that participate and send those in. So there's lots of ways that we're trying to get people to participate.
Eventually, there's only so much you can do. The individual has to assume responsibility, and so does the parent. Now, I think I've heard that there are some states that are raising the age for smoking.
It
So
failed in Nashua.
That's not going to cure it either.
No, I know, but it does curtail the sale of those devices to underage students, kids. But it was brought up, and it failed, and now they're trying at the state level because what people said at the local level is we want it to come from the state. Because if we do it in Nashua, they're just going to cross over to another town.
Vermont or Maine, just like they do for
No,
their
another
marijuana.
town, Hudson, Merrimack, Manchester, whatever.
Oh,
And so they said they wanted to see it at the state level to be up to 21. But it was put forward.
Ms. Oden?
Yes, and the new law, it states that schools need to figure out how to balance zero tolerance discipline with services that help students change behavior. And I do believe in that. I hate to see a student suspended because of this or miss any class time. What I would like to see, if we couldn't institute a Saturday program where the students get educated on the harmfulness of vaping, how addictive nicotine is, the damage it can do, especially to young kids, the health issues that are coming up. Kids are ending up in the emergency rooms and ending up in intensive care, and some are dying from the effects of vaping. I guess there's glycerin in some of the vape juice, and it's forming pools in the lungs, and they can't breathe. I like the idea of a parent phone call. I think parents need to know, but I would like to see if we couldn't get a Saturday education program for students that are caught vaping. And I have a question. The consequences, it says one is a warning by the teacher. Does that,
I believe that you're on the number
the
2.
consequences?
I think you're on number 2.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yep, you're right, you're right. But I would like to see education and, if they could watch a couple of videos, have a speaker in, and then have to write an essay on about the harms of vaping. Maybe it would have more of an impact, because just suspending them, I don't think that's educating them. I think that it might be a deterrent for some, but I don't think for all. And I think the best way to alert them is to the education. So that's what I would like to see Nashua move to and maybe work with the coalition to see if they don't have some ideas about having speakers come in for students. So,
Unless
you.
the consequence is strong enough, it's not going to make any difference. It's not. It has to hurt the kid. The consequence has to hurt the kid for them to stop doing it. Just like when you were a kid, when your dad slapped you, you knew you weren't going to do it again. So,
I never got slapped, so.
well, maybe you didn't do
There were-
anything worthy of
There were times
it.
he
but-
said, you don't do it, you didn't do it. But I don't think most kids would like to go to school on Saturday. I think they would find that a real cut into their recreational time.
Well, I think that's probably true. I wouldn't want to go to school on Saturday, so that may be a consequence that might stop it. But we need to track that information if you implement anything like that.
Does anyone else have anything to add to this discussion?
I got smacked twice by my father.
Okay,
He said what?
I got smacked.
he got smacked.
Yeah, I did
Okay.
too. Had my mouth washed out with soap too.
So, moving along, I think we're at the end of our agenda. I do have one item. I was wondering if we could move the start of this, of the policy committee back to 6:30, because we had moved it to 6, because we were backed up with some other committees, the meetings on the same day. So I'm wondering if it could go back to 6:30? if
That's up to the committee.
Okay.
That might be wise, because tonight's traffic coming in here
It was awful.
was bad.
Yeah, it
That's
was,
why I was
yeah.
just barely here on time.
Right,
here.
so, yeah, why don't we do that, go back to 6:30, that would help me when it comes to traffic.
I'm okay with it.
Thank you, Mr. Mosher. So we are at
Who
the end.
changed it, Ray?
Yes.
We changed it because we backed up a couple of meetings together,
Oh, okay.
that's why it got changed.
It used to meet at 5:30 too.
Yeah, plus they used to meet at 5:30, yeah. So unless we have any other business before this committee, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I moved to adjourn.
Okay.
Second,
Okay, on the motion to adjourn, Mr. Mosher,
yes.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. We are adjourned at 7:07 PM. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mosher.
You're welcome, sir.